You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. As I honestly reflect on my own life, I want more fun rituals that are just like life-giving and inspirational and romantic. Let whatever you choose be true to you. That is truly the most important part of all of this, because the purpose behind all of this is for you to have well-being. And just putting other people's idea of what that looks like on you will not authentically work. It needs to work for you and for who you are. Hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. For those of you who may not know who I am, my name is Felicia, and I am a self-care expert and a certified astrologer, helping others on their journey to self-love and to deepen their self-love. So every day I work to help you feel more comfortable owning who you truly are and remembering that the little changes that you make in your life can lead to big shifts, the ones that you want, the ones that you've been dreaming of. I am passionate about blending astrology and self-care, so you'll often hear me talking about astrological influences, and during every single episode, I do a little astro check-in so you can kind of have an idea of what is going on astrologically in the world. But the biggest thing that I come here each week to share with you is a little bit of what's been going on for me, hoping that it resonates with part of you. And in fact, that's one of my favorite things, is hearing somebody else share something from deep within their heart. It doesn't even have to be, the whole truth or the entire picture, but being able to really talk about that one piece that they either feel or have gone through. Sometimes that enough can just connect with that little piece inside of you that feels the same way, even if it's for totally different reasons or in a completely different context. And for me, I've had so many experiences in my life where that has led me to such big breakthroughs or even just such deep validation that it really comforts me and helps me to move forward. And so that is the heart, like truly the heart of A Bit From Within. And sometimes, to be honest with you, I get scared because I want to connect with so many people, and I don't want to dismiss part of like the whole picture. But that's the whole point of A Bit From Within, is to talk about that one piece that you're talking about right now that you understand in this moment. So as always, as I sit down and start sharing my heart with you, I find myself connecting to those reminders that I so deeply need. And that one, what I just shared, is a great reminder for me, because all day I have been deep in my feels in terms of feeling like I'm just not enough. That voice, that inner critic, is really strong today. And so I've kind of dragged my feet this morning trying to get into my work, because I feel like there's this heavy cloud on top of me. And whenever this happens, I do have this tendency to fix it. What is wrong with me? Why am I acting this way? What can I do to make it better? Or even looking back, I did all of these things to set myself up for success this week, and now I'm feeling this way. And then it adds to like the shame spiral. And I finally just had to have this moment where I'm like, you know what? A lot of this stuff that I'm feeling right now is like a little bit old, not super old, like, years and years and years ago old, but more just like the past couple weeks, I've been, shoving some stuff into like the back closet. Like, I don't have time to deal with that. I just need to keep moving ahead. I'm, trying to find my stride. I need to keep going. I've got so much going on. Like, August has been for me like a truly, I want to use the word busy, but I don't want to be cliche. It's been packed mentally, work-wise, time-wise, emotionally, personally, like in every single category except for spacious. It's been intense. And so I think that I've just pushed a lot of things off to the back burner, and, just like any sort of heavy thing, when it starts to get too full, or when there's not enough room left in that, area that you have, starting to break through the seams. And I think that's what's happening a little bit, is like I'm carrying so much stuff that it's been a day where I have to start recognizing and looking at some of that stuff. Now, one thing I do think is interesting, and I will share this with you as we transition into our astro check-in portion of the podcast, is that late last night, the moon moved into Cancer. And if you guys have been following for a while, normally I only talk about the zodiac sign the moon is in when I'm talking about the full moon or the new moon. Sometimes the quarter moons too, but mostly it's, hey, we're having a new moon in Virgo or we're having a full moon in Aquarius. That's when I'm talking about it in that kind of context. But what we don't talk about very often, because it happens so quickly, is that the moon is constantly moving around the earth, which means that every single lunar cycle, it travels through all 12 zodiac signs and then plus one to get back to the new moon, which is in the next zodiac sign. So essentially, if the new moon is in Leo, both sun and moon are in Leo, then it continues to move through the zodiac. So the moon moves from Leo into Virgo, into Libra, into Scorpio, into Sagittarius, then Capricorn, then Aquarius, then Pisces, then Aries, then Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, back to Leo, and then the next new moon is in Virgo. So you can see that the moon is moving a lot. And so while we don't talk about it, each time that the moon changes signs can influence us a little bit and affect us. And to be honest, even though I've been closely kind of developing my own relationship with the lunar cycle, and I'm very much into practicing myself and then also teaching others how to use the lunar cycle to create, more abundance in their life, to set personal goals, to set intentions, to remember to slow down. It's something that you have to do for yourself to track your own experience with it, which is why if you're interested in this sort of thing, I have 2 different really easy ways to get started on my website. And both are journals or like moon trackers, but they work in very different ways. One is the one that I've been using most often for the past few years, which is really just looking at the new moon and looking at the full moon. Of course, those zodiac signs will change and they'll color the influence a little bit, but as you kind of just dive into that, start developing a rhythm with it, this is a wonderful way to get started. And I have a updated tracker which goes through the end of 2023 on my website right now, if you're interested in that version. Now, there's this other version which I just recently started. And it's very basic right now because I'm still working with it, but I've put it out on my website, and I actually have a group of people who are doing this like moon journaling with me during this month. And we're about ready to meet up later this week and kind of talk about what we experienced. But for the first time, I really took careful notes of what was happening for me through each eight phases of the moon. And then again, for all of those zodiac signs the moon moves through. And I tell you what, this is just my first time of carefully looking at this. I learned so much about myself. And it kind of started to open my eyes a little bit to just how we actually are influenced by that. And maybe, if you're not really that into astrology, you're not all the way bought into that, then another way we can look at it is like the energy around us changes a lot. I think we all know this. One day we're feeling really upbeat and energized, and the next day we're feeling a little bit more rooted and grounded. The next day we're feeling really low or dark and moody. We kind of move all over the place. Some people more than others. But what I started to notice were just really interesting commonalities and shifts and whatnot. And I noticed that last night as I was kind of tracking. I don't honestly, who has time to stick with something every single day? I don't have that time. So what I usually do is I have my little journal on my desk, and then every couple days I'll remember, oh yes, I need to fill this out, or I need to look at it, and I'll look back at, think back on, okay, well, what was happening Tuesday? What was happening on this day? And then I kind of fill in the missing pieces. And during that time, it also gives me a chance to kind of look back and reflect. And I'm getting a little off topic, but this is an important example. I was chatting with one of my best friends last night, and they were just venting about how much frustration they're going through in their relationship right now, and that the emotions feel really high and intense. And so we talked for like 40 minutes about this, and then got off the phone, and then that's when I went and did my moon journaling. And as I was looking at that and filling things out, it was like, oh, wait, my friend, I know this because I always tell myself I'm their certified astrologer, I know that their moon is in Sagittarius in their natal chart. And so for most of the days where all of this frustration was happening, the moon was in the opposite sign from Sagittarius in Gemini. And what I've noticed in myself and all my, research as an astrologer and my knowledge is that when transit moon is opposite your natal moon, so natal is where it was when you were born, and transit is where it is in any given day. So when you have that opposition, this can bring intense and powerful emotions to you. So maybe you start noticing, okay, consistently, at least once a month, I have this day or a couple of days where I feel intense emotions and I'm feeling really powerful and I'm really stuck in my own point of view and I'm seeing how everybody else is not doing what I want them to do and not acting how it would be best for me. And you might be valid. Each of those things, you might be like, this is happening, and you start to get all of this conflict rising inside of you. And suddenly you start to notice that those lead to you finally having the bravery to bring up those things with other people, or to passive-aggressively do a little jab here, or start that conversation that it's really not the best time for, but you just can't help it. You might, if you were starting to track this, notice that that could be happening most often in your opposite moon sign. So with that knowledge, if you start to have that knowledge, suddenly you can start to soften and you can start to say, okay, this is a cycle, and now I can act more consciously. Actually, I noticed this myself this month because, this is what I told my friend. I said, for me, my natal moon is in Taurus. And so when the moon is in Scorpio, granted, I just started really tracking this, but I can say that I had a conflict with my partner during that same time. It led to this big thing between me and Dave. And so then actually it was funny because today the moon is in Cancer, which there's a lot to that. But I happen to know that that is Dave's opposite version. He's a Capricorn moon. And so this is his opposite moment. And so I found myself just kind of moving with awareness last night and into today, just kind of being aware. I haven't noticed anything crazy from him or intense, but just having that awareness. And so while, of course, I find this deeply fascinating, which is why I'm sharing it with you, one, I absolutely do not expect you to necessarily want or even feel like you have the bandwidth or curiosity or interest in necessarily watching through each of these zodiac signs. But there's so many ways that you can layer in this stuff into your consciousness. You could, of course, get one of the journals, as I mentioned, and just start to keep track of observations. And again, you don't have to be perfect with it, right? It doesn't have to be your top priority. It could be something that you fill out as it's around, as it feels applicable, that you can be able to look back on, because what we are searching for is your personal pattern, right? Another thing you can do is you can look up your own natal chart of where the planets were when you were born. You can find it for free online. Or if you want a little extra support, you could book a discovery session with me. I have two different kinds. One where we could just look at the chart elements kind of on a basic level, very easy to understand and start to incorporate. We could look at where your moon is. Or I do have a version where we can go a little bit more in depth. But you could find out where your natal moon sign is and just mark in your day planner or in your phone when the moon is in that sign for the next few months. So, okay, August 23rd through 24th, that's kind of my natal new moon time. And then you can start to layer it. Once you get kind of used to that, you start noticing the patterns, then maybe you start marking the opposite of that. And of course, I would be more than happy to help with something like this because I think it's so fascinating and so rewarding to add these layers of something unique to your life to help hold perspective for you, to help give you a different level of awareness, and honestly, a little bit of inspiration. And this topic is really a perfect gateway into the heart of today's episode, which we're going to be talking a lot about finding rituals in your life and the importance of finding rituals. So before that, I do want to talk slightly about this new moon we have coming up in Virgo. So I'm going to do that next. But I want you to just kind of, I guess bookmark this conversation, this idea of working with the moon, or even like having this kind of peripheral idea of what is happening for you astrologically, even with something as simple as the moon, simple and yet powerful as the moon, because it is a natural way to embrace ritual in your life. Okay, so all that said, let's talk a little bit about what else is happening astrologically. We have a couple of interesting things happening. On Saturday, we are having the new moon in Virgo. Now, for all of my earthy people out there, or my type A's, my perfectionists, my organizers, you are going to love this new moon. So what you need to know is that today, as I'm recording this, on August 22nd, the sun has now moved from Leo into Virgo. So on Saturday, when the moon catches up to where the sun is when we're going to have our new moon. And this new moon is always strong in whatever zodiac sign the sun and moon are in. So we're going to be having a very strong Virgo new moon. Virgo is the zodiac sign that is represented by the Virgin. And Virgo is an earth sign and is a mutable earth sign, which is kind of saying something because, like in general, earth signs aren't very mutable. They're not very flexible or adaptable or go with the flow. And so Virgo is the most go with the flow earth sign. But again, that's not quite saying that much, because a lot of Virgos like to be very organized. They're very meticulous. They have a plan, and their plan is not rooted in something that is, trivial. It comes from having a very strong instinct around how things should be done for the best of everyone. Virgos are fixers. They're always trying to look out for what is the optimal purpose of all of this? And how can we be efficient? How can we be organized? How can we do this with a clean approach? And there's a little bit of nobility to this. There's also a very humble attitude to this. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, so there's a lot of efficient, quick movement in communication, in doing things, and getting from place to place. So, hence why so many perfectionists and organizers have strong earth energy in their chart, but also can really have a lot of Virgo in their chart as well. I'll share with you that I'm a Virgo rising, and I notice that this in myself. I notice that I have this yearning for having things to be a certain way, for wanting to be able to fix the problem, for wanting to hop in and find a solution. This is very Virgo. And many, many of the best Virgos that I know, and I happen to be blessed with lots of beautiful Sun and Virgo people in my life, they are natural service people. They are people who give their hearts to other people. They want to help. They want to help others feel good. It goes very hand in hand with nurturing as well. And of course, it's all going to have its own twist if you have a lot of Virgo in your chart. So, or if you don't, this is still a really good time to lean into these things, because the truth is we all can resonate with each of the signs of the zodiac. We all have it playing out in our lives in different ways. And so whether this is very strong for you or whether this is an area of opportunity to lean into, these are some of the areas that you can focus on during this Virgo season, during this Virgo new moon. Now, I will say mutable energy is going to be very strong at this point. Part of the reason why is because on the day of the new moon, it's actually creating a 90-degree angle with where Mars is right now. Now, this is the other thing I wanted to share with you about, so I'm going to tie it all together. The sign of Mars has moved into Gemini. And what's very unusual about this is that it's going to be there for a really long time, way longer than normal. And the reason why is because by the time it finishes moving through Gemini, it's going to go retrograde all the way back through Gemini, and then it has to start over. So while Mars is usually only in a sign for about 2 months at a time, this time it's going to be there for like 6 months or just a little bit longer than that. It's going to be an intense Mars and Gemini season. Now, Gemini is a mutable sign and it squares with Virgo. So during this new moon, they are creating an exact 90-degree angle, which is a ton of friction. Mars in Gemini is going to maybe even turn up the critical part of Virgo's nature. You can picture, like I kind of mentioned, I'll use myself as an example. With my Virgo rising, I have this part of my personality that can get very judgmental, that can see the problems before I focus on what's going right. And that's a good thing in some areas because it can help me give other people ideas, focus on things they wouldn't have thought of. And it can be really annoying sometimes because I'm more apt to focus on, like I said, what's wrong instead of being more positive. So I have to choose to really figure out how I want to incorporate that part of myself that notices those things first. That energy might be even stronger during this new moon. And so what I would suggest is that you be very, very careful with your intentions for this month ahead, and that you think on a way more meticulous, small scale, small but mighty, rather than these kind of generalized blanket statements. And this is kind of a little bit of a soapbox I've been on for a little while, but I think we have a tendency with, new moons and this idea of manifesting to get on this kind of like lazy track with it where we just go into like birthday wish mode. Like, oh, I'm just going to make a wish, right? I'm going to manifest more money in my life, or I'm going to manifest more like success in my career, and like these blanket manifestation things. And instead of going for what feels obvious or what you feel obligated to manifest based on society or based on the goals, expectations you've put on yourself based on what other people see of you, clear all of that out and start with something really simple. And especially if it has to do with the way that you communicate or something you need to communicate on, or any kind of creativity, problem solving, invention type of thing, something that you're wanting to figure out or approach in a different way, this is going to be a really magical time to do that, because both Gemini and Virgo are actually, they are both ruled by Mercury. And Mercury is this incredibly fast-moving planet that actually has a ton of mental efficiency and can hold on to information and make crazy connections and do all of this stuff. And so if you use some of this energy right now and you kind of go into it slowly and with really clear expectations, I think this could be a really cool use of a new moon. I guess it depends on how you perceive it, but I think it could be really cool. Okay, that's probably more than the astrology that you wanted to know when you got to this episode. So I promise we're going to talk about a way different topic now. Let's take a quick break and then let's talk about rituals in our life. So not everyone who listens to the podcast casually, through Apple or through Spotify knows that I have a Patreon page, which I started when the pandemic hit in 2020. Part of the Patreon page is ad-free episodes of this podcast, but it's so much more than that. It is the lunar ritual guide that I create every month that kind of goes more into the astrology of the new moon and the full moon and ways to use it. But really, the platform was about connecting around yoga, because when 2020 hit and the studio that I taught at closed down, I still wanted a way to teach yoga and to connect with so many of my students who I love. And I love to practice yoga with them, but I also just love to connect with them. So, of course, it took a little while, but for the first year, I was just filming yoga classes and then putting them on the Patreon page. And why I wanted to do that is I wanted to create a library, and I wanted people to know that whether they were up at 3 a.m. and couldn't sleep in the middle of this crazy 2020 life that we had, that they could find a yoga class. Or if they were working from home from, normal working hours, they could practice yoga afterwards, or vice versa. Like if you wanted to practice first thing in the morning, like I wanted to make it as simple as possible. And so I just thought pre-recorded is the way to go because I don't want to have to deal with scheduling. So then about a year into it, so it's sometime in 2021, I think it was around July, but I might be making that up. I started offering live yoga classes through Zoom for the Patreon members. And this was the reason I started doing this is because I missed people so much. I couldn't do it anymore. I needed to connect with my students and with people who are like-minded and have a conversation. And I think that for me, what I was missing is not only walking into a studio space and having that container of this space and the music and being in person with the energy of different people, but I missed having those conversations that were so inspiring and that connection. So I decided that when we do a live yoga class, that it would be more than just hopping onto a Zoom and practicing yoga, but that we'd take the first, 15 to 30 minutes and connect on a topic and share a little bit from within with each other for anybody who wanted to share. Plenty of people prefer to kind of hop on and well, actually, most often everyone does talk, but I hope everyone knows that they don't have to talk, because I also know that especially when something's new, you kind of want to feel it out first. But the groups are usually pretty small and everyone is just beautiful. So twice a month, we get together and we talk on a topic before we practice a yoga class all together. So yesterday was the day that we had this, which is why I'm sharing all this information, just to kind of paint the picture. So yesterday morning we had a yoga class, and our topic beforehand was discussing what does ritual look like in our lives. And I loved introducing this topic because, and it makes perfect sense, not all of us see the things that we do every single day as a ritual. And so there's opportunity for all of this ritual magic in each of our lives that we're not necessarily harnessing with the intention. For example, you go to the grocery store on every single Tuesday and you park in that same parking spot or two right next to the one thing or in this certain aisle. And then you walk in and maybe you always get a coffee before you start your shopping, or maybe you always take a left and you go through the produce section first, and then you go down this aisle, and then you have this certain way of moving through the store. Maybe you pick the same checkout line, or maybe you do self-checkout, but you do it pretty much the same way each and every time. Maybe you get yourself a little treat that as soon as you get into the car, you eat your treat or you drink the soda you just bought, and then you go home and you unload it in a certain way, and this is your ritual. You didn't know it was your ritual, but it's a ritual. It's something you do the same way every single time. And so if you approach it as though this is your ritual, then comes all of this opportunity for it to become a little bit more soothing, a little less chaotic, a little bit more enjoyable for yourself. Now, of course, you don't have to like that example, but I think it's something that many of us can relate to, that you're like, you start to say like, oh, right, you're right. I do have this thing that I do. And actually, if I tweaked it a little bit and I made it a little bit more fun, or I added even more structure to it or more intention, I could even make it even more enjoyable for myself. I think some of us have rituals that we do that are a little bit smaller scale too. It could be as simple as I wake up and right away I go downstairs, I let my dog out, I have a glass of water with lemon, I stretch or I meditate or I run, like whatever you do, and then I start my day. That's a ritual. It could also be something like a self-care Sunday. Somebody mentioned that in the yoga chat yesterday, self-care Sunday, where that's the day that they kind of guard. And not only do they do things that are good for themselves and good for their soul, like the yoga class is a perfect example of something that would fit in with that, but it also is this kind of structure around them that allows them to say no to obligatory things that they just really don't want to do, or people that they don't want to see. Because for them, the Sunday is the day before the rest of their work week has to start. And so they're adding this sacred quality to it to protect themselves, to really enjoy their day, and to make sure they have things that take care of themselves before the week starts. And I thought that was beautiful. And now the first thing that I definitely want to say is that as you start thinking about this, I do think there's a tendency sometimes for some of us to start kind of crapping on ourselves and saying like, oh, I wish I had more ritual in my life, but I don't. I don't, treat anything special enough. Like I'm feeling really lost with that. And you start to beat yourself up. Hopefully you were not feeling that way and I didn't just like unlock that, but I will say that I have struggled with this. In fact, especially as a person who's, bringing up this conversation with the community, I feel like I need to be an example of somebody who does this perfectly, but that's just not where I'm at. I will say that as I honestly reflect on my own life, I want more ritual. I want more fun rituals that are just like life-giving and inspirational and romantic. That's what I want. That's what would be my ideal. And it's funny because my sister is such a good example of this. Sometimes I hear about the rituals that she has with her roommate that I'm like, why don't I move to Florida and live that life? Like, that sounds awesome. For example, they have this ritual where on Saturdays they wake up early and they go to the farmer's market and they buy all of their things. And then they usually go out to brunch or to a bakery and grab something. In fact, last week they went to this little French bakery and got breakfast, but then they also got like a cheese Danish to bring home and do like split it over tea in the afternoon. And I thought, oh my gosh, that sounds so nice. First of all, there's no reason that I couldn't do something like that in my life, right? Or that you couldn't either. But you have to plan for it, right? And you have to be willing to incorporate that sort of thing in your life. And so for me, if I'm comparing myself to that, I have not been acting on that. My life has been crazy and I am just go, go, go all the time. And so, besides my full moon and my new moon rituals, which I am really good about, keeping them. I want to add even more magic to them. But besides that, I started to think about like, well, what do I do that's a ritual? Yes, I do have a certain spot I park in the grocery store, but I don't have a certain day that I go. Yes, I have certain things I do in the morning and I do in the evening, but sometimes I do them before I have coffee and sometimes I do it afterwards. And sometimes I have a meeting in the morning. Like my life is kind of all over the place. It's not governed with a steady routine. And so that started to get me a little bit down at first. But then I started thinking, okay, stop comparing it to other things. Where do you have something that you do consistently and why do you do it like that? And so I started thinking about my work life, where I have a lot of ritual in my work life. For years, these are like silly little rituals, but I will almost always have a day where like I paint my nails as a ritual before I shoot a wedding. It started out as a superstition. It was like one day I had painted my nails before a wedding and that wedding went so great that I got it in my head that I'm like, if I have my nails done, then the wedding will go great. And I guess I should say, will go great for me personally. Weddings are always beautiful and awesome for the couples, but go great for me personally. So that was a small, like little ritual that I was doing, but that is part of this thing that I created. Then I almost always have a ritual that I follow on the day of a wedding. And it's changed over the years. When I was shooting with Dave a lot last year, we started doing like a Jimmy John's lunch before we'd go off to shoot. And then that has become my ritual. I'm like, I almost always go and grab a Jimmy John's before I head out for the wedding. And then if I'm with Dave, we always have to stop and get like a treat from a gas station. Like he loves to get like a Perrier water and like a Twix bar or something like that. Although we have not been doing that this year, we've been, focusing on his health, but that was like a little routine. For me, when I get home from a wedding, I have to go straight upstairs. I have to start uploading the footage to the computer, and then I start to kind of like unmask. I don't know if that's the best word, but like, I have this whole ritual around like taking off my clothes, taking out my contacts, washing my face, and then I usually take a bath. because, well, one, my feet and my body need to soak after carrying around my heavy backpack at a wedding all day. Or like weddings like I had this weekend where it rained all the time. Like my body is cold, my feet are cold, like just having that moment. And there's something about being in the water that is so clearing, that it's kind of like whatever didn't go well, I can just let it go down the drain, and I can just allow myself just to be there and kind of refresh and reset. And by the time I finish, then I go back to my computer and I pick out a sneak peek picture and I have fun kind of reviewing the day, which is really good for my mind, because otherwise I won't be able to kind of close the door for the night, and I'll stay up all night in my head replaying the wedding over and over. So I've created this little wedding ritual for myself that is my container. And it's something I'm going to do the same way every single time. And it helps me to relax. It helps me to process. It helps me to get back into my body, to treat myself well. And it works really well for me. And I think that whenever you have a ritual in your life, whether it is something that is a very spiritual process for you, or something that is a little bit more like mundane, like surrounding cleaning something or giving yourself tea or an exercise or whatever, literally whatever it is, the beauty of the ritual is that it is held sacred by you, and it is for a purpose. It serves a purpose for you. And when you have something like that in your life, you can really count on it. And your brain and your heart approach it differently. There's an immediate relaxation to the ritual. Like, again, it's kind of a silly one, but I can speak to it very authentically. It's like when I pull into the driveway, when I get home from a wedding, there's this, because I have a ritual waiting for me. And I know that Dave knows what I'm going to do, so I don't have to go, take the dog out or clean up anything or, whatever. Like, I can just go do my thing and be in the moment. And I think for many of us, that is what a ritual does for us. And one of the things that we discussed yesterday during the yoga class, because all of us used to practice at the same yoga studio, we were talking about the ritual of going to yoga and how it used to be at the old studio space, where it's like you'd walk in the door and part of the ritual is actually from the time you get out of your car. Okay, now I'm in Old Town. Now I'm walking down the street. Oh, there's grapes outside the building. I'm noticing the flowers. I'm noticing the nature. I'm walking in. I'm seeing if anyone else is around. Oh, I'm here. I can check in. I can put my shoes in the same little cubby that I like. I can hook my coat or whatever here. I can walk into this space. And most people have like that certain corner that they want to sit in, or this certain mat that they go towards, or whatnot. There's something ritualistic about getting ready for practice. And then you lay down on your mat, or you sit down and you start to observe, or you close down your eyes and you drop in. And eventually the music comes on and the teacher comes in and the class begins. And you know what you're going to get every single time. So even if you're having a bad day, or you're having a good day, or you're having a emotional day, like, you can be in whatever you're feeling inside the container of the ritual. And so as you start, as class winds down and you bow in to close the practice, you might need to take a couple breaths before you start rolling up your mat. Maybe you'll chat with someone on the way out. You'll continue to close your ritual all the way out to your car, whether it's how you walk, or stopping along the bench and noticing the trees outside, or even if you just beeline straight to it because you have to get to something else. The ritual still closes, when you move to the next thing, or maybe it's with the second you walk out of the studio space. And you feel something different. And obviously, I think yoga is a big part of that. But I think there's something about the ritual that we love. And I think for many of us who love yoga, or honestly, who had something prior to 2020 that we could count on that got messed with and got altered or got changed during the pandemic, it's been really hard for us, not only for the thing that we lost, but for the ritual that was lost. And so there's something to grieve there, for sure. And I mean, all of us know it. It's like, as I mentioned, like I'm teaching online yoga. I have plenty of online yoga classes, but doing yoga by yourself is different. And it's hard to create a ritual at home that feels as protected as going somewhere to practice, right? Like, for example, if I'm a student in a yoga class at a studio and I don't know, something crazy is going on outside of the classroom, like I don't have to think about it. I know that there's going to be a teacher there, and I can speak of this as a teacher. Like I know that I am holding space for that whole class. So if there's, a big thunderstorm happening outside, I might weave the awareness of that into the conversation, help people hold, mindfulness for it, but not be worried about it, right? It's like I'm the one watching out for anything crazy happening. But like when you're practicing at home, there's nobody else to guard that space for you. And so there's always this outside awareness of, what else is going on around you. This is something I've just struggled with a lot of practicing at home. It's not quite as special. And perhaps there's a challenge there. Perhaps there's a challenge of, I want to practice yoga more often. And right now, my home is the best place to do that because I either haven't found a studio space or I don't feel like I have the bandwidth in my schedule to find a new place and figure out a new schedule and create a new routine, which is going to take a lot of my heart. So is there a way that I could create more of a routine with myself around yoga? Maybe it's going to the live yoga classes online, or maybe it's, I don't know. It's something I need to think about a little bit more. But again, I feel like the space where it gets stuck a little bit is the fact that like you still have to juggle everything around you in your house as the person who lives in your house, right? Like for me, some of the reasons that I feel like I can't or easily drop into a yoga space is I'm like, okay, if I want to practice yoga, I have to roll up our rug and I have to get out the yoga mat and then I have to set up the space. And then I got to make sure my dog is somewhere where he's not going to be all over me, or I have to practice with my dog where he's going to be all over me. And that's going to be fine and fun and cute, but not the same. So I have to either accept that. And then if there's a delivery or if there's somebody that walks by or if there's whatever else happens, like the distractions, or if my partner gets hungry in the middle of it and then they're eating, it's like there's always something. And maybe that's the big difference, is that when there's a real ritual, it is so protected. It is so guarded. It is created with such reverence that it can't easily be messed with. The structure can't. Yes, sometimes you can skip it, right? Like you could have a weekly ritual, but like 1 week, like you're out of town. Guess what? That ritual won't happen. That's fine. But in general, it is kind of embedded that you're going to do it that same way each and every time. And it's going to be respected because it's revered. And so you cannot create a ritual around something that you don't have the ability to protect fully, or that you don't have the time to really invest in it and to show up in it. And so as you might think yourself about the areas in your own life where you might want to create a little bit more magic or a little bit more ritual, I want to share just a couple of, last little thoughts to keep in mind. Your ritual can be big or small. It could be small, like every time I take a shower, I put on the same music that I really relax and enjoy to, and I really notice as I'm washing my hair and cleaning my body that I am giving myself this moment to be inside the shower ritual. Or it could be something a lot more intense, right? It could be once a month, I carve out a super duper intense self-care shower, and I start by dry brushing or doing a self massage, and then I do a mask and I exfoliate my skin, and then I have this whole set of things that I do, and then after I get out, I dry off and I put this special lotion on, and I do these sort of things. You can create a really beautiful shower experience for yourself that you may not do every day, but you could give yourself that once a month. And that's your day where you just, you purify yourself, you purify your mind, maybe do a little bit of journaling before, after, or some stretching. Maybe you do it before bed, and that's the night that you really, set some big intentions for yourself, or goal planning, or whatever. Like, you can turn that into a ritual as well. That'd be a little bit of a more big ritual to take on. So your rituals can be big or small, and those are just an example of how to do that. If you are creating a new ritual for yourself, I think a pretty good rule of thumb is to make sure that you are not distracted by other electronic devices when you're in the ritual. It's kind of like the difference between having the TV on while you cook and clean versus like being in a ritual process around like cleaning or cooking your dinner and being in the moment with it, like listening to some music and letting your mind wander and taking in the scents and the textures, or really taking pride in cleaning and finessing your space. There's a difference, right? So don't blur the two. So if you have something that could be a ritual, but how you view it is like you're usually on your phone or listening to something or watching something, then maybe you just let that be whatever it is and you don't try to make it a ritual. Because I do think the sacredness of the ritual is that it requires your full presence. And so be in it. And then just remember, give yourself a break and remember that you don't have to like pick out a single ritual and then it's just going to be that way forever. If you're just starting to think about this in a new way, give yourself some space to like start to dip your toe in. Like, start with just one element, and then once you feel good with that, then bring in another element. Maybe you start with something you already do that could become that, and you just start to tweak it a little bit. And be willing to change it if it's not working or if it becomes too much. For me, I do have to have a little bit of fluidity, where as much as I would love to be, like I mentioned with my sister, where it's like, yep, first thing in the morning, like we do a farmer's market and then we go here and then we do that. Like, I honestly don't know if that's in the cards for me. I would love to say that it is, but at the same time, like, there is an inconsistent nature to my life where it's very much based on like how I'm feeling and what is a priority and what needs to happen. And so don't force yourself to fit into something that's not. Like, if it's a round peg and you're more of a square hole, don't force it. Let whatever you choose be true to you. That is truly the most important part of all of this, because the purpose behind all of this is for you to have well-being. And just putting other people's idea of what that looks like on you will not authentically work. It needs to work for you and for who you are. And so if you feel like I didn't, kind of cover or give an inspiration that would fit you ideally, please don't think anything of that. It's not on purpose. It's not intentional. It's like you have the kind of the keys to figure out what that looks like for yourself. And so this is a highly personal process. And maybe you start to, as you move forward into the rest of this week or this month ahead, you just kind of let this idea of ritual kind of float over you. There are some rituals that happen just once in your lifetime, like a wedding, right? Like, that would be like a once in a lifetime, well, maybe more for some people, but mostly a once in a lifetime ritual that binds your life with another person. And there's a ritual to a wedding. There's these people walk down the aisle in this way, and then these friends stand up there, and then these rings get exchanged and these words get shared, and then this kiss seals it, and then we walk up the aisle together, and there's a ritual to it, and it's beautiful. There's also, sometimes people have rituals around holidays. Or if you don't, but you want one, maybe you start to think about that. There's weekly rituals and monthly rituals, and there are things that you do that you never thought of as a ritual, but that can easily become one with your intention. So I hope that this gives you a little bit of inspiration this week. I know that it's a fun topic for me to think about, and yet I do also have to always balance it with not adding another thing to fix onto my list. And so that's my specific goal, is how can I think about this topic in a way that is fun and fulfilling and is part of, a well-being practice, as opposed to something that is like another thing for me to fix about myself. So I hope that you feel that very strongly from me as well, that this is just something that if it works for you, wonderful, as with everything that I share. So let's go ahead and end today's episode with a card drawing. I think it's time to use the Wild Unknown Animal Spirit deck. Whoop. Yep, this is the one. It's already falling over, trying to come out. I'm going to start to just shuffle these cards, and we will see how the universe wants to contribute to today's conversation. Oh. We got the Frog card. Clearing, cleansing, and healing. The frog and the water element are almost inseparable. The frog spends its first months of life entirely within this healing element, and then emerges to rest on land. But no matter how earthly the frog becomes, its need for cleansing and rejuvenation is regular. Frogs tend to become overworked and undernourished, so it's vital that such sensitive creatures practice self-care. This card serves as a reminder that water helps us cleanse, forgive, and release. Time to dive in. Frogs aren't meant to carry such a heavy load. Sometimes it's like the universe just wants to call us out. That's how I'm feeling when I read that, because I know that I needed that card, and I hope that you're having this moment too of like, yeah. And it's funny because I love thinking of the different elements when I think of ritual. It's such a big part of all of the full moon and new moon rituals is, what sign is the zodiac in? Is it in an earth sign, a water sign, air sign, fire sign? And the way that those different elements can add a different dimension to the ritual. You can burn something, you can blow something out in the wind, you could let yourself be taken by air, you could submerge yourself in water. You can cover something with dirt or with the earth. You can hold yourself in space on it. So love that idea of this frog and how it has to go back to water. Going back to water to rejuvenate is its ritual, right? So it's so beautiful and such a perfect way to end today's podcast episode. And final little reminder here, if you're still with me, this week especially, we are really moving back towards this new moon. And so the light is getting darker and darker and darker this whole week. So if you are feeling like slowing down by going inward, if you need less going on in your life, that is okay. Give yourself a break. Give yourself moments to pause. It is okay. It is all a part of a natural cycle. Take care of yourself. All right, with that said, I will leave us there. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you have a chance to either check out the Patreon or the website. If you're curious about astrology, you know where to find more, abitfromwithin.com. And again, thank you for listening. Find ritual, share your ideas with others. And if you have somebody who could use a little bit more ritual in their life, I would love it if you'd share this episode with that person. All right, until next time.